I keep the sink clean, not because it's dirty, because it's there. Most nights, after everything else is finished, I stand at it longer than I need to. I wipe what's already dry. I polish the faucet like it might tell me something if I look closely enough. The house is quiet behind me, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. Rita is on the floor nearby, not watching, just existing. I don't notice how long I'm standing there until I realize I'm waiting for something that never comes. The light above the sink is the only one still on. It's a little too bright for this hour, but I don't turn it off right away. I like knowing exactly where I am. The edges of things, the shape of the room. When the rest of the house is dark, this small square of light feels contained, manageable. I rinse the cloth again, wring it out, hang it back on the handle. I smooth the towel with my hand like it matters how it falls. These are motions I've done so many times they don't belong to any particular night anymore. They all blur together. Rita shifts behind me, just enough for me to register that she's awake, or maybe that she was awake already. Her nails make a soft sound against the floor when she stretches. Then she settles again, her body heavy, comfortable with the space it takes up. I don't turn around right away. There's no reason to rush the end of the day. Nothing waiting on the other side of it. Tomorrow will come whether I meet it halfway or not. I check the sink again, run my fingers along the edge. There's nothing there. I know that. Still, I check. When I finally step back, I catch my reflection in the metal. Bent slightly forward, focused. Like someone in the middle of an important task. I almost laugh at that. Almost. I dry my hands slowly, even though they're already dry. The towel is warm from the light. I notice that too. I notice a lot of things like that now. Small details that don't lead anywhere. I turn the faucet handle once, just to be sure it's off. It always is. The house hums quietly around me. Refrigerator, heater. The soft, steady noises of things that keep working without needing attention. I stand there long enough for those sounds to settle into the background, like they always do. Rita sighs in her sleep. It's a deep sound, like she's letting go of something heavy. I wait for it to pass before I move again. I don't know why. It just feels right to wait. When I turn off the kitchen light, I don't do it quickly. My hand stays on the switch for a second longer than necessary. I notice that pause too. I notice how often I pause now. The dark doesn't bother me. I know this house. I know where the chairs are, where the counters end, where the floor creaks if you step too close to the wall. I move through it carefully, not because I'm unsure, but because there's no need to hurry. Rita gets up when she's ready. Sometimes she follows me. Sometimes she doesn't. Tonight she stays where she is, trusting that I'll still be here when she decides to move. That kind of trust didn't mean anything to me once. I didn't even register it. Now it lands somewhere quieter, somewhere I don't have words for yet. I walk into the living room and stop for a moment, just standing there. The furniture is exactly where it was last night. The same chair by the window, the same blanket folded over the arm. Nothing has shifted, nothing has changed. And still, I stand there. Time feels different at this hour. Looser, less demanding. I don't feel tired exactly. I just feel finished. Like the day has been folded and put away, even if tomorrow looks exactly the same. I listen for Rita's breathing again. I can hear it faintly from the kitchen. Slow, even, reliable. That sound anchors me more than I expected to. I take a step, then another, moving deeper into the dark. I don't turn on any more lights. I don't need them. The house holds its shape without them. Standing there between rooms, with nothing pressing on me, I'm aware of a quiet truth I don't say out loud. If this were all the day asked of me, I could live inside it. Not happily, not dramatically, just steadily. I don't know when my evening started ending like this. I don't remember deciding it. It feels like something that happened while I wasn't paying attention. Rita shifts again, closer this time. I feel her presence before I see her, a weight settling into a familiar spot. I step around her without thinking, careful not to disturb the shape she's made for herself on the floor. I pause once more, right there in the middle of the room. No reason, no decision attached to it, just a pause. Then I keep going. And let the night close the way it always does. The days before Rita arrived didn't fall apart. They just thinned. That's the only word that fits. They lost weight, lost texture. They stopped pushing back when I moved through them. When I retired, people asked what I was going to do with my time. I gave answers that sounded reasonable. Fix a few things around the house. Read more. Take it slow for a while. I wasn't lying. I just didn't know how little those things would end up asking of me. The first weeks felt like a long weekend. I slept later. I made coffee without checking the clock. I stayed in my robe until noon sometimes, because there was no reason not to. That felt earned. Then, the weeks stacked up. Morning became something that happened without my participation. I woke up, but not into anything. I moved from the bedroom to the kitchen and stood there waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. Even though I'd set the machine the night before, I watched it drip like I'd never seen it do that before. I started cleaning early in the day, not because things were dirty, but because it gave the hours some shape. Wipe the counters, sweep the floor, check the mail. The mailbox was often empty, but I checked it anyway. Afternoons were the hardest. They stretched wider than they used to. Too much light, too much quiet. I'd sit in the chair by the window and watch cars pass, even though I didn't recognize any of them. Sometimes I'd turn on the television and let it run without sound. The moving images made the room feel less still. I didn't feel sad in any dramatic way. I wasn't crying or panicking or thinking about the past with regret. I just noticed that fewer things registered. Less excitement, less irritation, less interest. It was like my reactions were conserving energy. Weekends came and went without distinction. I stopped noticing Fridays. Monday felt the same as Wednesday. Time didn't move forward so much as it spread out sideways. Friends called at first. We talked about nothing in particular. The weather, a show they were watching, a project they were thinking of starting. I listened. I responded. Then the calls came less often. I didn't reach out to replace them. That didn't feel like a decision. It felt like drift. I spent more time maintaining things that didn't need maintenance. The sink, the counters, the garage. I organized shelves that had been organized before. I labeled boxes I had no intention of opening. There was comfort in repetition, not pleasure. Comfort. Sometimes I realized I hadn't spoken out loud all day. That would register briefly, like a fact you file away, and then it would pass. I didn't miss conversation. I missed the friction of it, the way it interrupts your own thoughts. Without that, my thoughts looped quietly. I noticed my body moving less. Fewer reasons to stand up. Fewer reasons to go out. I could go days without leaving the house and not feel like I was missing anything. The house held everything I needed. Food, light, silence. At night, I stayed up later than I used to. Not because I was tired, but because going to bed felt like ending something that hadn't fully happened. I'd sit in the living room with a lamp on and let the hours pass. Sometimes I dozed. Sometimes I just sat there, aware of the clock but not moved by it. Sleep came unevenly. Mornings came anyway. I didn't name any of this as a problem. There wasn't a clear reason to. Nothing was wrong enough to fix. My health was fine. The house was paid off. I wasn't worried about money. I didn't feel lonely in a way that demanded attention. It was quieter than that. It was the sense that if someone asked me what I was looking forward to, I wouldn't know how to answer without thinking too hard. I wasn't unhappy. I just wasn't being pulled forward by anything. The sink became a kind of anchor, something solid to return to. I polished it at night because the day didn't give me a clear ending. Cleaning it felt like closing a loop. This is done. This part is finished. Then I'd turn off the light and move through the house slowly, not because I was tired, but because speed felt unnecessary. I noticed I was standing still more often, in doorways, at the top of the stairs, in the kitchen with the refrigerator open longer than needed. Those pauses weren't deliberate. They just happened. Sometimes I tried to remember when I'd last felt urgency. Not stress, urgency. The feeling that something needed me specifically, at a specific time. That memory was vague. I told myself this was what rest looked like, that after years of schedules and deadlines my system was recalibrating, that things would fill in naturally. They didn't. They just settled. Days became a series of small, self-contained tasks. Eat, clean, sit, wait, sleep, repeat. None of it felt heavy enough to resist. None of it felt light enough to enjoy. There was a subtle grief in that, I think. Not for anything lost exactly, more for something that used to be there without me noticing. Engagement. I didn't think about the future much, not because it scared me, because it felt abstract, like something happening to someone else. I lived inside the present in a narrow way, focused, limited, safe, and shrinking. If you'd asked me then whether I needed anything, I would have said no, and I would have believed it. But standing alone in the kitchen most nights polishing a sink that was already clean, I had a sense, quiet, persistent, that my days were becoming easier to endure and harder to inhabit. I didn't know what to do with that awareness, so I kept the sink clean and let the rest of the time arrange itself around that. The way Rita came into my life didn't feel like a decision. It felt like a loose end someone handed me and asked if I could hold it for a while. It was a phone call from a friend I hadn't seen in months. We talked about practical things first. Weather, traffic, how long it had been since we last spoke. Then he mentioned the dog, almost as an afterthought. He was moving. Smaller place. No yard. Too much change at once. He didn't ask if I wanted her. He asked if I could take her. I remember looking around the kitchen while he talked. The sink was clean. The counters were empty. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. There was space. Too much of it. I said yes before I really thought about what that meant. Not because I felt generous, because it sounded manageable. Rita arrived with a bag of food, a worn leash, and a list of habits I didn't commit to memory. She walked into the house like she wasn't sure she was allowed to be there yet. Nose down. Tail neutral, no excitement. No fear either. Just caution. I didn't crouch down to greet her. I didn't talk to her in a soft voice. I showed her where the water bowl was and set the food down like I was setting something aside for later. She ate. Then she lay down near the back door. That seemed logical. The first few days were all logistics. When to feed her, how much, how often she needed to go out, what time she woke up, what time she settled. I adjusted my day around those questions without really noticing I was doing it. There was inconvenience, of course. Fur on the floor, mud on the mat. The sound of her nails clicking when she followed me from room to room, not closely, but close enough that I had to account for her. I noticed irritation before I noticed anything else. The way she stopped in doorways. The way she waited instead of moving when I expected her to. The way she stared at me when she wanted something instead of making noise. I told myself this was temporary. That we'd both settle. That either she'd move on, or I'd get used to it. Those were the two options I allowed myself. At night, I still stood at the sink longer than necessary. That didn't change. But now I was aware of another presence in the room. Not interactive, just there. Rita would lie behind me, her body warm against the tile, breathing slow and steady. I didn't think of that as company. I thought of it as an adjustment. Mornings became more structured without feeling fuller. I woke up earlier because she did. Not eagerly, just awake, waiting. I put food in the bowl. I watched her eat. I rinsed the bowl when she was done. Then I stood there again, hands on the counter, like I always did. The difference was subtle. The pause had edges now. I took her outside at the same times each day. Not because I enjoyed it, because it was required. The walks were short, practical, around the block and back. I didn't vary the route. There was no reason to. She walked beside me without pulling. Sometimes she stopped to sniff something I couldn't see any value in. I waited. I didn't hurry her. I didn't talk to her. Eventually, she moved on. We repeated that day after day. Inside the house, she kept to predictable places, near the door, by the window, on the mat. She didn't try to get on the furniture. She didn't demand attention. She seemed content with proximity, not contact. That suited me. There was no emotional recognition in those early weeks. No moment where I thought, this matters. I didn't feel softened or opened. I felt occupied. Occupied is an underrated state. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't promise anything. It just takes time and fills it with small obligations. I started noticing Rita's patterns the way I noticed the houses when she preferred to sleep. How long she took to eat. Which corner of the yard she always checked first. These were observations, not affections. Still, they accumulated. Some evenings, I realized I hadn't turned the television on at all. Not intentionally. I just hadn't needed the noise. The sounds of the house were enough. The refrigerator, the heat clicking on. Rita shifting her weight on the floor. I didn't think, this is better. I thought, this is fine. That felt like progress, even if I didn't name it. When friends asked how things were going, I talked about Rita in factual terms. She's calm. She doesn't need much. She's easy. I didn't say anything about myself. There was nothing to say yet. The routines settled in quietly. Feeding times, walk times, cleaning times. None of it felt meaningful. None of it felt empty either. It just held. I still polished the sink at night, still checked it twice, still stood there longer than needed. But now, when I turned away, I had to step around a dog sleeping on the kitchen mat. That required attention. Not care, attention. And attention, I was learning, changes the shape of a day whether you intend it to or not. I didn't think I was bonding with Rita. I thought I was managing her. It would be a while before I realized those two things weren't as different as I believed. After a while, the routines stopped feeling like something I was doing to my day. They started to feel like the day itself. Mornings took on a shape without me deciding they should. I woke up earlier, not abruptly, just awake enough to register the quiet. Before I even stood up, I listened for Rita moving around. Sometimes she was already up, sometimes not. Either way, that check happened before I thought about coffee or the weather or anything else. I'd get dressed, walk into the kitchen, and put food in her bowl. I didn't rush it. I didn't multitask. I stood there and waited while she ate, leaning against the counter like there was nowhere else I needed to be. That waiting became part of the morning. If she ate slowly, the morning moved slowly. If she finished quickly, things picked up. I didn't fight that. I adjusted without thinking much about it. After breakfast came the walk. Same leash, same shoes. Same route. I didn't experiment with new streets or longer loops. There was comfort in knowing exactly how far we were going and when we'd be back. The walk wasn't exercise. It wasn't reflection. It was movement with a purpose that wasn't mine alone. Some days Rita stopped more than others. She'd plant her feet, nose close to the ground, focused on something I couldn't see. At first, that irritated me. I wanted to keep moving, to keep the sequence intact. Then I noticed that if I waited, really waited, the irritation passed. Nothing bad happened when the walk slowed down. The day still unfolded. That was a small realization, but it stayed with me. When we got back, I'd wipe her paws if they were muddy, hang the leash in the same place, wash my hands. Those steps never changed. I think that's when I started to feel the difference most clearly. The day had edges now, not big ones, just enough to keep it from spreading out too far. Late mornings were quieter. I'd do small tasks around the house, laundry, dishes, checking things that didn't need checking. Rita would move from room to room, never far away, always settling somewhere she could see me. I didn't think of that as companionship. I thought of it as supervision. Still, I noticed when she wasn't there. If I walked into the living room and she wasn't on her mat, I'd pause for a second, not worry. Just orientation. Where is she? Then I'd hear her nails on the floor somewhere else, or see her head lift from behind the couch. That pause happened before I realized it was happening. The afternoons didn't stretch the way they used to. They still felt long, but they had checkpoints, another walk, another bowl to rinse, another moment where I had to stop what I was doing and attend to something outside my own head. I didn't resent that. It made the hours feel anchored. There were days when something interrupted the routine. Weather. An errand that took longer than expected. A morning where Rita slept in and didn't come to the kitchen right away. Those days felt off balance in a way I couldn't ignore. Not disastrous, just wrong enough to notice. I found myself adjusting everything else to compensate. Feeding her later meant walking later. Walking later meant eating later. Eating later meant staying up later. One small shift moved the entire day. That's when I realized how much of my life was now built around these sequences. Not emotionally, structurally. I still polished the sink at night. That didn't change. But now, when I did, there was often a dog asleep behind me. Her breathing filled the quiet in a way the refrigerator never could. If she wasn't there, the room felt unfinished. That startled me the first time I noticed it. I told myself it was just habit, that I was used to another body being in the space. That it didn't mean anything deeper than that, but habit is meaning when you look at it closely. I started leaving the house less spontaneously, not because I didn't want to go out, because I was aware of timing, how long I'd be gone, whether it would interfere with the next walk or meal. Planning like that didn't feel like a burden. It felt like alignment. There were moments, small ones, where I noticed my own body responding differently to the day. I stood up more often. I sat down with more intention. I didn't drift as much. When I rested, I rested. When I moved, I moved. Rita didn't demand any of this. She didn't ask for attention or affection. She just needed things at certain times. Needed space, needed consistency. Providing that made my own needs quieter. Not gone, quieter. Evenings settled into a rhythm I didn't question anymore. Dinner, dishes, sink, walk, lights off. The house moving towards sleep in predictable stages. I didn't feel excited about this life. I didn't feel trapped in it either. I felt placed. If something went wrong, if Rita threw up, or refused food one night, or seemed slower than usual, it disrupted more than just that moment. The entire day tilted. I'd find myself more alert, more careful, watching for signs that things might unravel. That alertness wasn't panic, it was investment. I realized gradually that I was depending on Rita as much as she depended on me. Not emotionally, the way people talk about needing someone, practically. My days needed her needs. Without them, the hours would spread again. The sink would stay clean, but the day wouldn't know where to end. I didn't say this out loud. I didn't frame it as insight. It just became clear through repetition. I wasn't rescuing a dog. I was staying. Staying in the morning. Staying in the afternoon. Staying in the spaces between things. And that staying, repeated often enough, changed the shape of my life without asking my permission. It didn't make me happier. It made me here. And for a long time, that was more than enough. It started with smaller changes than I expected. Not the kind you notice all at once. The kind you explain away without meaning to. Rita taking a little longer to get up in the mornings. Her pause before stepping off the mat stretching just a few seconds longer than usual. The way she'd look at the leash, and then at me, as if she was checking whether we were still doing this the same way. I noticed all of it. I told myself that didn't mean anything. Dogs slow down. Bodies change. Days vary. That's normal. I repeated that to myself the way you repeat something factual, so it doesn't turn into something else. Still, I adjusted. We left the house a few minutes later. The walk got shorter without my deciding it should. I waited more when she stopped. I stopped checking my watch altogether. The rhythm changed quietly, like someone turning a dial a fraction at a time. The first time she didn't finish her food, I stood there longer than usual, not worried, just attentive. I rinsed the bowl and set it back down later. She ate then. That should have been enough to settle me. It wasn't. After that, I started watching more closely, not anxiously, precisely. How she moved from room to room, how she shifted her weight before lying down, how long she slept in the afternoons. The house felt more delicate during those hours, like everything depended on something small continuing to function the way it always had. Nighttime changed again. I woke more easily. Not fully awake, just aware, listening for movement, for the sound of nails on the floor, for the quiet confirmation that things were still happening the way they were supposed to. When I didn't hear anything, I stayed still longer, letting my ears adjust, letting the silence prove itself harmless. Most nights, it did. Some mornings, Rita didn't get up when I did. She stayed where she was, eyes open, watching me move around the kitchen. That look wasn't distress. It wasn't pain. It was something more neutral than that. I found that harder to interpret. The routine still held, but it felt thinner, like it might give way if I leaned on it too hard. I scheduled the vet appointment without telling myself a story about it, just another thing that needed doing. I wrote it down. I put it on the calendar. I didn't talk about it to anyone. The days leading up to it felt suspended, everything provisional. The walks, the meals, the evenings at the sink. All of it felt like it was happening with an asterisk I couldn't see yet. Rita didn't act like anything was wrong. Or maybe she did, and I just didn't know how to read it yet. She moved more slowly. She slept more. She stayed closer to me in the evenings, not touching, just within reach. That proximity made me more careful with my movements. I stepped around her more deliberately. I waited before turning lights off. I made sure the floor was clear of anything she might trip over. None of that felt heroic. It felt necessary. At the appointment, I listened. I nodded. I asked practical questions. Age, where, management, monitoring. Words that didn't shock me, but didn't comfort me either. There was no moment where everything went quiet. There was no dramatic shift. Just information. When we got home, the house looked the same. The sink, the counters, the mat by the door. Rita walked in and lay down like she always did. That normalcy was unsettling. I expected something to feel different, heavier, clearer. Instead, everything continued, and that continuation felt fragile in a way I hadn't felt before. The real fear didn't announce itself right away. It showed up in how I moved through the day afterward. I hesitated more, not because I didn't know what to do, because I was calculating. If I leave now, will she need to go out later? If I stay up longer, will she settle or get restless? If I change this, what else shifts? The entire day became conditional. I stood at the stairs more often again, hand on the railing, not tired, just assessing. How steady am I? How steady is she? What happens if one of us slips? Those questions didn't need answers to change how I felt. They just needed to exist. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of losing Rita in some dramatic sense. I wasn't imagining scenes or endings. What scared me was quieter than that. It was the thought of the days opening up again. Mornings without reason, afternoons without checkpoints, evenings without a natural place to land. The sink would still be clean. The house would still be quiet, but the structure that had been holding me in place would be gone. That realization sat with me heavily. I didn't try to push it away. I adjusted instead. I changed how I planned my time. I shortened outings. I stayed closer to home. I made sure the routines were easier to maintain, not more efficient. Care became less automatic and more deliberate. Not frantic, focused. Some days went smoothly, and I'd catch myself relaxing again. Other days, something small would wobble. A skipped meal, a slower step, and the tension returned immediately. It was exhausting in a quiet way. But it was also clarifying. I understood then that I wasn't just caring for a dog with changing needs. I was holding a fragile system together, one that included me whether I admitted it or not. I didn't feel capable. I felt responsible. There's a difference. Responsibility doesn't wait for confidence. It just shows up and expects you to do the next thing. So I did. I fed her, I walked her, I watched, I waited. I didn't look for reassurance. I didn't ask for certainty. I accepted that neither of those were available. What was available was presence. And staying, that was the breaking point. Not a crisis, not a decision. Just the moment where I understood that stepping away wasn't an option, and that the fear I was carrying was the cost of remaining where I was. So, I stayed, quietly, carefully, one day at a time. After the appointment, nothing snapped into place. That was the first thing I noticed. I kept waiting for a feeling that would tell me we'd crossed into a different part of the story. Relief, maybe? Or resignation. Something with a clear edge to it. It didn't come. What came instead was the next morning. I woke up the same way I had been waking up for months now. Light through the curtains, the house quiet but not empty. Rita shifting somewhere nearby, the soft sound of her adjusting her weight before she settled again. I stayed in bed a little longer than usual. Not avoiding the day, just letting it arrive at its own pace. When I stood up, I moved more slowly. Not because I was afraid, because I was paying attention. The routine was still there, but it felt different now. Not thinner, just altered. Like a path that had been walked so many times it adjusted to the shape of the feet moving over it. I put food in Rita's bowl and waited. She ate. Not all of it. Enough. That became the new measure. Enough. I rinsed the bowl and set it down again later, the way I'd learned to do. She finished it then. No urgency, no insistence. Just continuation. The walk that morning was shorter, not intentionally. We turned back earlier because she slowed, and I followed that without questioning it. The route adjusted itself. The day adjusted with it. I noticed how much effort I'd been putting into expecting something to fall apart. When it didn't, there was a quiet release in my body that I hadn't recognized as tension until it eased. The house held. The sink still needed wiping at night. The counters still collected crumbs. The floor still showed paw prints when it rained. None of that felt symbolic. It felt ordinary. Ordinary had become valuable to me. I stopped thinking in terms of before and after. That framing didn't help anymore. There was just now, and the small decisions inside it. Do I stay home this afternoon? Do I leave a little earlier tomorrow? Do I sit longer before standing up? Those choices didn't feel heavy. They felt integrated. Some days were better than others. I didn't try to smooth that out. When Rita moved easily, I moved easily with her. When she hesitated, I hesitated too. Matching pace became more important than maintaining efficiency. That was a change I hadn't expected to accept so easily. In the evenings, I still stood at the sink longer than necessary. That didn't stop. But the standing felt less like stalling and more like settling, a way of marking the end of the day without forcing it closed. Rita would lie behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body without touching her. I didn't think about what that meant. I just made room for it. I found that I wasn't scanning the future as much anymore. The questions that had crowded my mind after the appointment didn't disappear, but they softened. They waited their turn. I accepted that uncertainty wasn't something to solve. It was something to live inside. The routines adapted around that understanding. Shorter walks, more pauses, more time built into the day for waiting without frustration. Waiting stopped feeling like wasted time. It felt like part of the work. I didn't feel proud of myself for handling things well. That kind of framing felt unnecessary. I wasn't handling anything particularly well or badly. I was continuing. That was it. Some nights I noticed a quiet gratitude arrive without announcement. Not gratitude for anything in particular, just the sense that the day had been inhabitable, that it had held together without demanding too much from either of us. I didn't celebrate that. I acknowledged it, then moved on. The fear didn't disappear. It found a place to sit that wasn't at the center of everything. I could notice it without rearranging my day around it. That felt like balance. Rita slept more. I rested more. The house moved more slowly around us. I didn't resist that. I had spent so much time earlier trying to keep the days from collapsing that I hadn't realized they were capable of changing shape without breaking. This was that change. Quiet, unimpressive, sustainable. I didn't need the situation to resolve itself fully to keep going. I just needed it to keep going enough. And it did, so I did too. One routine at a time. One adjustment at a time. One ordinary day stacked on top of another. That was the resolution. Not an ending, just a way of staying that didn't exhaust me anymore. The house is quiet again. Not empty. Just quiet in the way it gets when the day has finished saying what it needed to say. Rita is asleep a few feet away from me. Not curled up tightly, not alert, just resting in the middle of the room like she's found the right spot and decided to stay there for a while. I step around her without thinking. I've learned how to do that. I still clean the sink at night. That hasn't changed. I still check it once more before turning off the light, even when I know it's already clean. I don't argue with that habit anymore. It does what it needs to do. Some evenings I pause there longer than others. Some nights I don't pause at all. I've stopped trying to read into it. What I notice now is simpler. I notice that the day ends, and that I'm still inside it when it does. I used to feel like my time just spilled forward, 1 hour into the next without anything holding it in place. Now the days have seams. Morning, afternoon, evening. Each one marked by small things that need doing, whether I feel like doing them or not. That turns out to matter. Rita didn't come into my life to give it meaning. She didn't arrive with any intention at all. She just needed somewhere to be, and I happened to be there. I didn't save her. I didn't rebuild myself. What happened was quieter than that. I stayed. I stayed for the morning routine. I stayed for the short walks. I stayed for the adjustments when things didn't work the way they used to. And in staying, I stopped drifting. That's as much as I'm willing to claim. I don't know what next year looks like. I don't know how much will change, or how quickly. I know that some parts of this won't last forever. I'm not pretending otherwise. What I know is that tomorrow will ask for a few specific things: food, time, attention, a steady pace. And I know how to give those. My name is Victor. I'm 66 years old. Rita didn't give me a new life. She gave my days somewhere to return to. Tomorrow, I'll wake up, listen for her moving around the house, and see what needs doing first.